Zimbabwe is well known as a pirate country in terms of software, especially applications, games, and even operating systems. I have been involved in teaching courses in ethics and professionalism within the domain of computing. Uh, so it's an area where I have experienced a scenario where textbooks, which I used to teach, and some of the teaching material use a case study of Zimbabwe as a pirate country with statistics that goes above 95% of all software used in that country being pirated software. We are a research community in computing, and therefore we need to break away from that sort of culture and that sort of notoriety. We don't want to perpetuate among our students, the students we teach, and the researchers that we train to continue turning the country or perpetuating the notorious aspects of our country relating to software piracy and unprofessionalism with respect to use of software. Right. Many of you in your projects, you are aware that you are required to apply for professional for ethics approval. That concept should go further beyond simply applying for ethics approval. You should extend it to the various computing tools that you are using. That includes hardware, operating systems, software that you are using. So your entire research project should really be based on proper ethics, proper professional practices, and that includes software licenses. So for that reason, I need to present, to talk about the tools that you use. Right. Many of you, we know in our country, we already have challenges relating to finance, our institutions, and we ourselves may not have enough money to buy all the software that we need. Right. For that reason, I will always recommend open source software. I recommend that each researcher in Zimbabwe in computing should start moving away from the Windows environment or from using software that require a license, which involve purchasing. And for that reason, I am recommending open source software. There are many reasons actually we should adopt open source. First of all, we want to develop our software industry as a larger branch of the economy in Zimbabwe. So we need to innovate in terms of software. Open source allows us to do that. We need to be able to use software that is licensed and that whose license is conform to our budget and our practices. We are people who would like to share. We are people who would like who do not have money. So open source would support that. We definitely would like to learn a lot about these technologies, and open source allows that. We also want, of course, to break away from our country being known as a pirate country, and so open source allows that. So there are many advantages to look at open source and make sure that all our projects are conformant in terms of professionalism, in terms of ethics, and they conform to the general ethics approval that we get for many aspects of our projects. So the use of, since we are computing researchers, we heavily use computing tools. Most of your projects, especially those in IT, those in computer science will definitely involve programming. It will definitely involve running experiments on computing. You are probably developing a model and using data, and so you use a lot of computation. So for that reason, you need to make sure that all the tools that you are using are properly licensed, or they have a proper you use technology that allow you to be able to remain compliant in terms of ethics, in terms of professionalism. So for that reason, I recommend open source. So if you are moving to open source, the first is to decide which open source operating system you are going to use. Definitely, the Mac OS is not an alternative because it's expensive, obviously, and the software on it is also expensive. You might run some software that is open source on both Windows and Mac, but I would recommend that we move to open source. Open source, I'm sure you are all aware about the Tech Hub. We do have tech hubs around the country at all our universities, and those tech hubs are always asking for innovations, asking for patents, and open source technology supports innovation, supports the possibility of advancing the technologies beyond what they are, and patents as well. So it is important that we seriously consider moving away from operating systems such as Mac or Windows and move to Ubuntu. On the screen, you see Ubuntu, which is Linux. There are many Linux distributions. You will see there are quite a lot of them, and you should feel free to choose anyone that could be useful. But I would recommend Ubuntu since it is the only one of the few, maybe with Manjaro, which have got an African name in them. Manjaro, of course, you are familiar with Manjaro in East Africa. There might be others that have got an African name in them, and therefore this is what I would recommend. Of course, they are popular internationally, not only in Africa. They are also popular around the world. So it might be important for you guys to consider that. For most of my work, I prefer using Ubuntu, of course. Ubuntu also is coming from someone who grew up within the SADC region in South Africa. This is Mark Shuttleworth. Mark Shuttleworth is a South African millionaire. Although he is based in the UK, he grew up in South Africa, just like Elon Musk. So, and then he managed to develop Ubuntu. But Ubuntu is not his invention. It is based on Debian, the Debian operating system, which is also one of my favorite. So he is only enhancing it. This is where I mean we could also adopt Ubuntu and develop our own Linux distribution. So it is important for you to choose one. There's also Fedora, of course, and its derivatives. So we have Debian and its derivatives, we have Fedora and its derivatives. And on the Debian side, the most popular derivative is Ubuntu. So that operating system is one that I would recommend for all users who use open source software. So here is what the previous long-term version of Ubuntu looks like. And it's actually very beautiful. It's fast and doesn't degrade like Windows. It's easy to manage. It is efficient in the way it does things. Normally you have this bar. You can move this to almost anywhere, to even to make it look like Windows down there. But I would, of course, could be the default position for Ubuntu, for some version of Ubuntu. So you can put all links to the apps that you use most often, and at the bottom here you can see that you can see all the apps that are installed. In this installation, I only have a few systems. I have my browsers, I have Dropbox, I have Reference Manager, which is JabRef, which is the one I recommend as well for you. And of course, we have LibreOffice and a few other apps that probably are not worth mentioning here because I don't use them much, but I do use R a lot. I also use, for instance, RStudio, but I haven't installed it yet. You have email, browsers, email in terms of evolution, but you also have Thunder. You could also install Thunderbird. Browsers, you can install Firefox and Chrome, and you can see here I have Chrome here, but there's a possibility of having Firefox as well. Firefox actually comes installed already, so you don't have to install that one. Dropbox, because I do store my files under Dropbox, it also runs on this. So basically it's all I need. With For writing documents, I could use JabRef together with with Office LibreOffice Writer. That's enough for writing research papers. Um, in most cases, that could be enough. But you can do updates. It does support software updates, which is good. Of course, I have installed very few programs here. Um, some programs installation is also very easy. You don't have to go and download software. You just need to install it and from the command line. For instance, here I become administrator so that I install some of the software that I need. Of course, here I left an I in my command. You must be familiar with Unix and Linux commands. And to install, I only need to say apt install. Some of the software I need here is RStudio, which I use a lot to even to prepare my presentations. Most of you have seen a presentation of my slides, especially the ones I recently used to present at the seminar for computational linguistics. So I use RStudio for that purpose. And for programming, obviously, I use Visual Studio Code. This is open source from Microsoft as well. And so it does the job in terms of my writing code. Of course, there are other programming languages that are important, right? Right. In this case, you can see that RStudio is not available at the moment because it's not on any of the repositories. I think this is because developers of RStudio are not really um, are not. But interestingly, we do have. I downloaded RStudio before, but that looks like an old version. So when you go to some of these websites for apps that you want, you can have RStudio. You can search for RStudio and download the version that runs on Ubuntu. So that should not be a problem for most of us or most of you to just install RStudio. And then, for instance, here, of course, cookies. I would like to save preferences and right. Ideally, it should allow me to install the Debian version, isn't it, or the Ubuntu version. For the Ubuntu version, right, it gives you some instructions. You don't have to download anything. Here, you install that base, and you can add a repository that you want. If you want to install it from that repository, after you added the repository, you could then install some of these things. It's interesting. So you can see that you can update that. You can then install some of these recommended commands. After that, you could then install the key in this particular case. And once you have done that, you could then install software that you require. Of course, RStudio, you guys may not use that, so I'm not going to go into the details of that. But of course, use R. I already have R here, which you could see. R here. R is, of course, for statistics. There are a lot of other tools that you could use for statistics here. But Ubuntu is basically all the features that you would want. This one is a minimalist installation, because all I need, for instance, is my, let's see, my Java, in terms of programming. In my case, I could, you can install Java, or you can install Python, Python version which is running on this one is Python 3. So basically, it's a minimalist installation, but this system is something that we can use for our work. In terms of an office suite, we do have this office suite, which could be something that we use quite a lot. For instance, we have one that can edit Microsoft documents, which I think you guys could also adopt. If you know already Windows, I think you can always use this. And associated with that, you put your reference manager in Jabref. In my case, I have that installed. Of course, this, you can install this and it could work for you, right? And let me see if I can make it halfway. And also this one, I could use it, make this halfway. Oh, interesting. Right. You could see that, you can see that I have the two. This is a reference manager. You can already see I have been researching about languages, especially computational linguistics. So you could potentially, you could manage your references using this database. I'll cover that more. And you could basically cite from here. For instance, you could be writing. Of course, you could something like references, but computational linguistics. Oh, computational linguistics, and it's possible to basically, um, cite. I'll just pick any here which may not be relevant. Suppose I want to cite these three, and all I need to do is to connect. First, I need to connect it to LibreOffice. If you connect it, it will show that it is connected. For instance, here I'm connecting and it shows that I'm connected. And all you need to do is to select the citations that you want to put after your writing. And if I click cite here, it will go and insert the references that I have selected. You can see I've selected the three which come, and you continue typing. But it also adds the references at the bottom without, all you need to do is to say update cite in text, cite special, merge citations. You could, of course, merge citations there, and you could update, ensure that the paragraph is up to date. You could update now. If you, all this is happening in the main document. So here we have the citations. Of course, you don't need to type this one. I typed it, but it seems Jabref puts the reference section on automatically. Of course, this is a strange, interesting paper in that it has written by so many people. So you can format these citations automatically, and the system can do that for you. So you can keep on typing and citing, and those things would come to the citation area here. So at the moment, I don't think I have set it up so that I can choose the citation format. Of course, you could look at settings here, automatically sync bibliography when setting citations. Yes, look up BibTeX entries in the active tab only, and so on. And so it's when this menu is activated when it's connected to LibreOffice. So you could potentially continue typing and citing, and once you edit something, it comes at the bottom there. You can see that my citations are not complete because I have not I have not set it up properly. I could use upper or any. In the citation itself, you can see that it mentions all the authors, which is not a good idea. But if there are many like Adelani, it simply say at R. If there are 3, it mentions, or 4, it mentions all of them. 1, of course, in this particular case. So all this is open source, and you can automate your entire research work, especially writing and also programming. I use my Visual Studio Code for programming, and of course there is more. You can install Python. You are familiar with Notebook. For those who are doing, who would like to do programming while you are using Notebook as well, so you could potentially just use this. Is a very powerful editor which you could use. Let's see, it's inviting me to try a new theme, which probably is okay. I usually prefer the dark theme. Obviously, you can format this, go to settings. You can also install plugins. Like I may want to install, because I use Python a lot, I could use Python. I could work with Python, especially things like IntelliSense from Microsoft in this case. IntelliSense, Pylance, lighting, debugging, code formatting, refactoring, unit tests, and more. Right, so this could be, because Microsoft is now publishing open source. It could be, and also they are the publishers of this particular IDE, which is very popular. It's also open source, so I could basically install that. I could have that installed. Right, and there are a lot of other ones. I also use JSON a lot. Let me see if this could be installed. I also use JSON files a lot, and XML. So it would be interesting to see what do they have in terms of JSON. JSON, there's Beautify, there's JSON for Visual Studio Code and all that stuff. Let's see whether they have XML as well. Language support is coming from Red Hat. This probably verified ownership. Let's see what these guys have. These have quite a lot of features. Autocorrect QTT, but I don't think there's XQuery. They have XQuery for that. They have everything else except XQuery. But of course, it's attractive because it's a Red Hat, which I would like, of course. So the only feature that I want, usually like for about XQuery is the query language, XQuery, which is very good. But XML formatting, XQuery, this one has got XQuery. So you basically got everything: validation, linting, execution, and all that. So there is a lot of focus here on XQuery, and I do use, of course, other databases like BaseX and all that stuff. So these two are interesting to install to complement the XQuery format. But if I am using BaseX, for instance, BaseX for XML store database, as an XML database, I may want to install this as well. Right. But otherwise, you could then also install other languages like JavaScript, because we use Node.js extensions. This is Node.js, simple, fast. Yeah, number of plugins that are important for Node.js, and right, yeah, you could basically do your own your complete development using that. And of course, it's a powerful operating system. You can even teach all of computer science curriculum with tools that comply in terms of software licensing. So in terms of research, we do have a complete set of tools that we need. For instance, here I do sometimes genealogical research and as well as programming. So I have Grams here, which is a tool that allows you to do genealogical research. But otherwise, in my case, I've only in this particular installation, I've installed very few apps because I basically use it for programming in Python, and I also I don't do much on it except development work, and mostly from the command line as well. Of course, the command line is very powerful. You can do almost all programming. For instance, my favorite editor is called Nano here. I can write all, even applications using this particular one, so it's fairly easy. And so, in summary, I would recommend you guys to move to Linux. Ideally, if you have a personal laptop, to move to Linux, you want to completely move and start doing your work 100% in Linux. It has got other capabilities and even tools like calendar. You can maintain your research calendar using that. This can also be linked to your Google Calendar. If you go to your settings, normally if you go to settings, you could link it up to some of these things. For instance, you can see quite a number of appearances here. Usually I choose light, of course. You have applications, you can do these applications, and users. You could have all your users and so on. Right. There are so many. You can even choose your default. For instance, for email, we could choose either that, or I could use Thunderbird. But Thunderbird also does. If you use Thunderbird, you may also want to use it for calendar. But you could also use Evolution for those who like Evolution. Videos and music are more or less the same. Shotwell usually is very good for photos. The web, of course, I would use Google Chrome or Firefox. It doesn't matter, right? Things like date and time, set it up. In my case, it's automatic. It also detect my location. At the moment, it's set to New Zealand, but that should not be the case. It's supposed to be automatic. So, like in this particular case, the time is 5, which is okay. It should automatically detect that time. Definitely not in New Zealand. I could say I am in the UK, London, United Kingdom, and specify that. Right. Um, so it is important to make sure that at least you move to an environment like this. Let me see if I can log out of that and show you another operating system that you can use. Of course, I need to exit most of my systems here first. Exit, because I could shut down from the command line, which is good. Now all these are installed. I'll come back later. Of course, the important thing about your JabRef, which I will cover JabRef later on but when you start collecting your literature, you need to choose your reference database. For open source, we should use this one. That is very important for open source technologies. all these are references, of course. You could see that you can read the abstract as you go along before you download the paper for relevance. So that one is fine. This one also is fine. I'm not going to save this document. I was just using for demonstration. Right, exit, and now I can exit. Ideally, I could close that. Power off this computer. Oh, I could power off that computer, and then I would like to show you another environment that, for instance, another Linux system that is an open source system that we would want to use. Of course, I have several here installed, and I will show you the Debian operating system. The Debian operating system. Right. Debian operating system usually is, this window is very characteristic of Debian. And Linux, you can see that is Debian GNU Linux. That's the name of this particular operating system. Right, while it is booting, it is important. I don't want to emphasize this too much, but we need to start using technologies that promote innovation, that are suitable for our environment, are suitable for our condition where our institutions have limited funding. We have limited funding even for hardware. So it's a challenge that we could use that. So there we are. Now logging into Debian. I'm currently using Debian 12. So Debian is a very powerful system as well. You can see that my it's the same as the one you did, this up bar here is, and of course you can see screens here. The other one is that particular screen. Of course you can move in between here. Notice that once I choose a screen, that one disappears. Of course, the whole idea is for it to move away so that you can focus on your work. For instance, I could choose the browser here, and the screen should, everything disappears. That's the vanilla operating system in that case. Um, of course, I haven't updated this system for quite a while, so it might be important for me to go to the command line and update my Debian system. The idea is that when the menu goes away, so that you can focus on your work. So here I want to update my system, so I become administrator. So the moment I say SU, which means super user, I want to become super user, which is the administrator on Linux. The prompt changes from $sign to hash to show that I'm administrator. Now I can update the system. I can, first of all, you update, you check whether there are any updates. So in this case, it is refreshing its list of versions of all the software on the Debian system. This feature is not available in Windows. You can't really do that. But it's very powerful, obviously. In Windows, it's a bit clumsy. It's poorly implemented compared to Linux. Everything is beautifully done and well designed. Now I can sort of update my system. Update, upgrade. Let me use upgrade. Right, so it will find a lot of upgrades, and I'll say yes, and it will download all the updates. And this is done graphically, and it updates the entire system. And updates are regularly released. And so this system is more or less similar to, you can see here I have applications. I can browse it as if I'm browsing a Windows system. You can see there are categories starting from utilities, where you get calculators, terminal, and everything else. System tools, where you can get settings and package manager. All these are familiar, like Synaptic. It's a very familiar one. Of course, sound and video, you get music and sound recorder, videos. Of course, there are other things. You also have RStudio now. This is the one that I usually use, and Visual Studio Code under programming. RStudio, I love it because I use it to prepare all my slides, which are in HTML. Eventually, they will be compiled to become HTML. So RStudio is it's a statistical package as well for those who are doing data science. It's very useful. So I love it because it allows me to move away from PowerPoint. Right. May we upload crash reports? Yes, no problem. If you come here to create a file, you can choose Markdown, and you can choose presentation, and you can choose what type of. I usually want HTML slides rather than PowerPoint. And after that, I am ready to go. So you can see this is how you write your slides, and you can even compile them. When you save, I will save it as a test, or rather testing, just to show how I create my slides. Of course, the extension for these files is R Markdown. So if I save, it will, each time I save here, it will compile the slides to HTML. You see it's compiling, setting up everything and all that stuff. And then it creates your slides. Finishes, create HTML based slides. So this is a slide, I didn't do anything. So you can see, you can move, and it has a contents here at the bottom. So these are more like PowerPoint slides, and you can go to a particular slide. This is the title slide. Of course, it's a test, I didn't. Now you can do, this is how I created those slides. You can even give it data to plot graphs on your slides. So I have moved away completely from PowerPoint, and it's 100% open source. And when you finish, you can put it on a website. Students can then browse these slides. It's not a big deal. So I love it for that purpose. If you go to the folder where I have saved these slides, you will notice, okay, it seemed to be, you will notice that if you go to the folder, which I have to go to the file manager in this case, you could see that I saved it under documents. Now you see HTML here, which basically means if I click it, I can automatically go to a browser and start seeing my presentation. In this case, it's Firefox. It's calling Firefox, and you can then view your slides. Right, it will render it as a set of slides, and you can use your arrow keys just so like in PowerPoint to navigate the slides. Right, so those slides are viewable in HTML, which is much better. You can put it on a website. Your students can browse your entire course, and then you could potentially just do one slide, a presentation with one slide, and then you put together all the lectures, lecture slides, which of course will go to specific lecture slides if you want. So let me close Firefox. That's Debian. I love this operating system as well. It's very efficient, nice, and everything. Of course, here I choose a dark theme because sometimes a dark theme is necessary. Here you can see that we have settings there. On activities, that's when you can invoke. Notice that although I am using just one I'm using one screen, but you can move, for instance, a window to another screen. And for instance, here, if I want to go to move all these things to a different sort of screen, you can drag your windows and move them to another window. For instance, here I might actually say, I want this to be in another window and this one to be here, right? So you activate that by doing that. And then here, right, now we have that window with that. Of course, there is always another one. And you can navigate by Control Alt and arrow keys. You can navigate from one window to another. And then I can close that and have my browser, right, there's my browser. So I can navigate from one window to another. Of course, you can do this even on Ubuntu because it's the same. It's more or less the same. Right, so that's let's see the progress of our updates. Still running. So this has got a different arrangement, but it's basically the same system as Ubuntu. It's just that this one uses vanilla genome as designed, but as designed by the original creators of Genome, the Windows environment. On Ubuntu, they tweak it a bit to behave in a certain way. So you can see that there are a number of apps. I FileZilla because I sometimes connect to my online server, where there is a lot more of some of the important similar programs we have seen under Ubuntu. So with that, I come to the end of this session.